Welcome to this meeting of Economy, Environment and Infrastructure. This is a strategic committee, and any issues that are operational or ward issues are not a matter for this committee, should be dealt with out with the meeting, the normal sort of thing. But I'm sure there will be some ward things coming in, like nobody listens to me as the chair of this particular committee on that particular one. I will be asking for a small change in the agenda later on, prior to the finance item, which I'll be looking to take the exempt reports first, but I'll come to that when we get to that actual point on the agenda. So can I ask Nick for the SEDERUNT and apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've had no apologies this morning that have been notified to me, and we have 18 members present at the start of the meeting.
I think Ros Surtees and Tommy Sloan are apologies.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, are there any declarations of interest? David?
Yeah, Chair, I'll declare an interest in item 8 by virtue of the fact that I'm a subcontractor to Enterprise and D&G, but I don't think I need to leave the room.
Any others? Malcolm?
Thanks, Chair. Likewise with David. I'm a supplier to Enterprise and DG Enterprise. But again, by the nature of the report, I don't think I need to leave the room. There's nothing specific relating to my involvement with that.
Okay, thank you very much. No other declarations of interest? Thank you. We then move on to item 3, which is minute of meeting of the 20th of March 2008 is for approval, and I'm happy to move.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Minute of Enterprise and Service Subcommittee on the 23rd of March for approval.
Happy to move, Chair. Happy to second.
Thank you very much. And then minutes of HARBOURS Subcommittee on the 26th of April 2008 for...
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you, Kate.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. We do have a member of the Best Value Audit team with us, Lindsay Harris from, I don't know where you're from, All right, okay, thank you. Welcome to this committee, and I do apologise because I'm actually going to ask for people to be removed for the first 2 items. I'm just changing but you'll be able to come back in later on once we've got these 2 items out of the way. So members, it's okay to take the exempt items first, in which case we should consider adoption of resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A4 and paragraph 6, 9, 12, 13 of time. That took way to make some important decisions there for Council. We're now going on to item number 6, the Economy, Environment, Infrastructure, Revenue, Budget Development of Sustainable Action Plan for Planning and Regulatory Services. I can confirm there is a change in 2.2, which is agree the action set out in paragraph 3.11 rather than 3.13. Steve Rogers is here, unless Director, you've got anything to add?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Steve, have you got anything to add to this?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Members, open for questions. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking particularly at the recommendations from Improvement Scotland, which quite clearly seem to conclude and recommend certain things about the way we chose to set, or particularly the first recommendation, page 28, under section 9.1. Recommendations are don't use unrealisable income estimates for budgetary purposes, basically. In the report, I think the report gives it a different flavour, which suggests that that's something that they noted rather than recommended or concluded. So I'm just it's really just to highlight that I think we should really take on board the recommendations of the Improvement Service. And I don't know why we couldn't have just copied and pasted that rather than sort of reinterpret them. So that's maybe just the style of the author, perhaps, I don't know. It's really just to make sure that this is something members I think have seen a long time, but we get presented with budget options that actually outline that these are income projections that we could maybe achieve through the budget, but I'm very conscious as well that report was in January 2018. That was before we set a budget, and we had recommendations from an independent third party saying, don't set unachievable targets, yet we didn't have that information to hand whenever we set our budget. That concerns me, so I'm just wondering if there's an explanation for that.
Director, do you want to come in?
Yes, Chair. Thanks, Chair. The way we go about addressing this very much depends on the total outcome of our revenue account for 17-18, and we've not reported that to members yet. Our finance colleagues are still finalising that report and these details, and we will do our final outturn report to the July meeting of this committee. And it's once that full picture is delivered, and this report alludes to that, that we will come back with the adjustments that we need to make to that income line to address and balance our budget going forward in a sustainable manner. And whether or not we can do that internally as a directorate, or whether we require corporate centre funding to help us do that, it will be determined in that final report. So yes, January was when we got that report, but we really needed to get a picture of the full end of year budget before we can actually solve this issue and find out how we solve the issue and by what vehicle. We could have waited to July, but I know members were very keen to see this. It was on our June target, so it's here today, and it basically explains that we'll have to come back in July with the final answer. But it gives you recommendations to think about today going forward.
Steve?
Okay, no, I appreciate that feedback from the Director, but I think the concern was that it was long known, because it was a budgetary pressure that we'd had at this committee in terms of whether or not we were going to actually have a balanced budget at the end of the year, and one of the areas of concern flagged up prior to this. In fact, it was the November committee, I think, that recommended that we do this, because we didn't have, there was no way we were going to meet the target in terms of the income that we'd set in the budget the year before. So it's not just a one-off. This has been a sort of over a number of years. So it wasn't an unknown to us, and I'm sure members had made that clear at the time. So I suppose my concern is the report sort of really thoroughly reflecting on the significance of the report by the Improvement Service, because clearly this is over a number of years has been an unachievable target and an unrealistic one at that.
Director?
Again, for members' information, what I didn't say was back in January, we weren't optimistic, but we were hopeful that the situation would improve as we became to the year end. It did last year when we had the same pressures through the 16-17 budget. And at the end of the day, when we did the calculations, we weren't far short. But unfortunately, between January and March, that improvement hasn't manifested itself. We were in the climate of the adjusted fee structure that the Scottish Government had approved, and that was a maximum of 125,000 for a large application. And we were hopeful that we might see 2 or 3 of these which would completely change the position, but unfortunately that has not materialised. And again, the key thing is to try and get the total picture of the budget before we can make this adjustment and find out how that adjustment can be made.
Cttee, then Ian, then David.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess my question is, it's similar along the lines of Councillor Thompson next to me. I'm slightly baffled why there's projected incomes aren't actually based on reality, is basically what it boils down to. Certainly I understand what you're saying is at the last minute in 16-17 we actually managed to get within that budget, and we actually had the shortfall. We didn't have a shortfall. But 17-18 we've got a shortfall, and we have not adjusted the income, the budgeted income for 18-19. So why hasn't that been adjusted? But equally, when we look on Appendix 1 at the building warrant fee analysis, right back to 2012-13, the budgeted income has not changed between 2012 and 2020. That's 8 years, and we've not even adjusted that. And certainly when we look at the planning application fee analysis between 2012 and 20, it's only in the last 3 years that we've actually raised it slightly, but only by 922. So, I mean, surely it would seem common sense, looking at the data and the analysis, that we should have adjusted these figures before now. So my question is, why are we in the position where we've actually, this is now going to be potentially 3 years where we're going to be out of kilter with our projected budget?
Stephen?
Chair, yeah. There's two issues essentially here. One of the first of those is the way in which these income lines tend to fluctuate quite dramatically from 1 year to the next. And if you look at particularly the tables in Appendix 1, I think that illustrates the extent to which it's actually very difficult, first of all, to predict these year-on-year fluctuations, and the second issue that arises from that is highlighted in the covering report, where it refers to the difficulty of adjusting the budget every single year to reflect those unpredictable upwards and downwards fluctuations in income. Because the only way that we can adjust the budget to bring it back into balance would be to take that amount off the expenditure line. And I think, as the report points out, the key expenditure within planning and building standards is on staff. So we're not in a position where we're able to adjust the expenditure year on year to bring it in line with the reality of what's been happening with the income fluctuations. So what the report is suggesting is that actually we need really a new model. And there are two components to that new model. The first is, as is suggested by the Improvement Service and is picked up in the recommended action plan towards the end of the report, is that we do need to set a more realistic baseline in terms of the income projection. But sitting alongside that, in order to deal with the issue of the constant year-on-year fluctuations, we need to establish what's referred to as a service reserve, which is almost, if you like, a pot which we're able to carry from 1 year to the next. And in years where we make a surplus on the income target, we're able to leave that surplus sitting in that pot to draw on in future years when we're in a deficit position, which is what we have been in. But the key to that is resetting those income targets to a more realistic and achievable level that reflects the reality of where we are in terms of application numbers, fee income, and general activity in the wider economy, because this is all linked to general activity in the wider economy.
I would just like to say, I understand that there are fluctuations, but when you look at the budgeted income, there's been no adjustment made whatsoever. And certainly when you look at, as I say, in Appendix 1 on page 23, between 2016-17 and 17-18, there's actually a difference there of about £500,000. Now, thank goodness we did have a surplus, otherwise we would have been, in a much more different situation. But it's just the fact that the budgeted income hasn't changed at all. And I get that there's fluctuations, but there's fluctuations everywhere apart from our budgeted income, and surely we should be looking to the future.
And I think that's what this report is about, is changing that travel direction. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Can I ask a question first, Chairman, before and I'll probably some questions and points after that. First question would be, when did the Council make the decision to align income to the delivery of the development management and building control or building standards? Where is that decision made, where we've made the decision as a council that we will supply a service through development management, building standards, subject to the level of income stream that they bring in? If we get that question answered first, then I'll maybe make a few points.
Well, it's within the ABB, it's within the budget. So as well as managing the expenditure against those services, we also have to manage the income, so that income forms an integral part of the ABB budget for my service.
I suppose the question was, nowhere is it noted what the budget allocation is. Where did the council make the decision to provide a service, develop, manage building standards in particular, and it would be subject to the income generation that comes in? That's the question. I don't recall we've actually made that decision at all anyway. It might well be a strap line somewhere. And I've made this point again and again and again and again. Talk about under recovery of fees. It's a statutory. If I take the economy seriously, look at the very first priority for the council, building the local economy or the regional economy. I don't think MD would disagree in regards to building the local economy. The planning department, building standards, is fundamental to that. It's bringing it forward. If anything's got to encourage that, it'll be that department. One of the complaints we often get in regards to those departments, you could say, would tell us that it's always round about the economy. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's lesser. So again, I mean, it talks about the action plan, bring it in light. I think we have to. This should have been finished at the budget process with administration. You should have just took this seriously, as far as I'm concerned, allocated the level of funds that's required, rather than having to go back to the council cap in hand. And that's what I feel we're doing through this APPRAISal process. We should take the economy seriously and just fund this department to the level it's needed. And we've got a shortfall here. It's as simple as that. We certainly, Chairman, we absolutely see this department as being a serious contender when it comes to delivering a larger economic base across Dumfries and Galloway. It should be funded. I suppose our approach to a new model would be a conservative.
There's a point in here, Ian, because what you're basically saying is the budget's been set. You would have took £600,000 off buses that would allow people to actually travel the region, which they wouldn't have done under your budget. But then we've got a problem here with the Development Sustainable Action Plan for Plan and Regulatory Service. That's not the whole budget. This is part of the budget setting. We're looking at a process here to improve that. We've agreed the budget this year. That's done. It's now in the process of moving forward. What you're saying is you didn't want us to move forward. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying very opposite, Chairman. I think the administration should get hold of this. The administration should get hold of that. You're using the words "want to go back," so I'll leave them in your mouth. That you've said you want to go back.
Well, you said you want to go back. You should want to move forward.
I'm making a clear point. Fund this department to the level it should be funded. It's too important to the economy. Stoplights coming back every year, again and again. 8 years in a row this has been.
Right, Ian, I'm going to let the officer answer that now, and then I'm going to move on to David after that, all right?
Well, I'm not sure I'll be able to answer all of Councillor Carruthers' points there, Chair, but certainly the intention here is to move us into a position where we're not coming back year on year. And that involves putting in place that action plan, which requires the resetting of the income target to a more realistic level, combined with the setting up of this service reserve in conjunction with the finance department, which will allow us then to manage the budget through the fluctuations that inevitably are going to occur every year, so that we avoid being in a situation where we're having to report back to you every quarter or every 6 months on a budget deficit situation that has arisen because of under-recovery of fees.
Director, you want to come in?
Yeah, and I think the other important point in this is that where a directorate has a budget pressure, the protocol is for that directorate to deal with it within its own budget, and that's what we're discussing with our finance colleagues, and that is why the total outturn at the end of the year is important to see how we balance that off.
David, then Cttee.
Just getting back to what Councillor Carruthers was saying, just to clarify, I mean, it seemed to suggest that he was complaining that we, as part of activity-based budgeting, that we have income targets. I mean, that's always been the case. That's, in every department where they actually generate incomes, and that's part of the overall budget. I think the main issue is with regards to we haven't really reviewed that budgeted income over a number of years, and that's something that we hope to address. But it's always been standard practice that that there would be a certain level of income you'd be expected in departments that generate an income. Just can't understand where the Conservative group are coming from.
David.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
Thank you. Glad to see someone else getting a little bit of the heat from you for an occasion. I probably should resist making the partisan point, but I'm going to do it anyway. 3.1 comments on the poor performance of the region's economy. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think this and recent administrations should take responsibility for that. The planning department, I've always found them very friendly and helpful, but out in the country there, the public perception isn't as good as it could be, actually. And yet here in the report, it seems to lament that it doesn't have the chance to raise fees even more. And I thought that would be a sort of a dangerous combination of raising fees at the same time as you're somewhat unpopular. But we need to look what we can do ourselves to increase economic activity and make things better. And I tried last time, but you shut me down, so I won't make the list as long. But there are many things in this council could do better in linking itself to the economy. And just one example, because it is relevant, if you phone your building standards helpline that you're given when you ask for a warrant, quite often due to understaffing, naturally you're put through to it just rings out. So you've spent 5 minutes wasted, and that's repeated across sites all across Dumfries and Galloway. I think it's just indicative of all the points I was trying to make before in previous meetings. As a regulator, I don't think the planning department should be trying to make money off of planning. It does have to cover its costs somewhat, but we want to be pretty relaxed about that. And I think we need to be careful how we talk about it. The director's comments could be misinterpreted to the extent that someone might think that he regretted that there hadn't been more wind farm applications. And wind farms are not always popular, so we shouldn't be seen to have a bias in favour of more applications. And if we give the perception that somehow the budget of the planning department...
Just before you go on, David, that you've made a form of accusation here on the director, and the director obviously has no bias in any planning application. It's done on its own merit, so therefore perhaps there's a bit of clarity that needs to be said on that, Director.
Yeah, because this is being recorded, I will just repeat what I said. I said major applications. Major.
Which tend to be wind farms. And I just said it.
No, not necessarily, no. The major applications include housing over a certain number as well, so there are major applications in previously. So can you come to your point?
Quite, it's just indicative of the dangerous water we might be sailing into when our income is dependent on certain types of applications.
You've got a question have you got
my
a question
point is
for
that
the
we need to do what we can to support the local economy, which we very rarely do in this committee. And I don't know if you agree with me, but one of the best things that we could do to mitigate the problem whereby we have much less relocation of English people here and investment in property, that Dumfries and Galloway could make a clear statement that, come what may, we will not leave the United Kingdom.
And that will not be a decision of this council anyway, so at the end of the day. Right, John.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We talked about major developments, and one of the magnificent major development is the new hospital. Just for clarification, what sort of planning fees did the council receive for the hospital, and would these fees have stayed within the department?
Steve?
I can't tell the precise figure, but we would have received the then maximum planning fee, which was in the region of £19,000. And yes, those fees stay within the department because they form part of that income budget line that we have to manage. I have to say that by far the bigger contribution to our income from the new hospital comes through building standards and the fees that have to be paid for the various building warrants and building warrant amendments. So we did actually receive fairly substantial income. And I think that's actually reflected in if you look at the tables in Appendix 1, you'll see that there was actually a spike in building warrant fee income for the 2 years prior to the construction of the hospital, and that largely is attributable, not entirely, but largely attributable to the various applications to do with the new hospital.
Andrew, then Cttee.
Thank you, Chair. It's in 3.8.1 where it's talking about the staffing reductions. I'm just seeking clarification because first of all talks about 2 vacancies which are frozen. Then it goes on to talk about how the removal of a further 6 and 7. Does that mean then we're looking at a reduction of 9? And then it goes on to state that there is there would be an impact on performance and long-term capacity. However, you've then made a statement about its staffing has steadily reduced in recent years, and it's gone from 19 full-time to 13 and a half. Does that mean we're going to end up with only 4 full-time once you've removed the 9, if I've got my arithmetic right?
Steve?
Chair, if I could maybe just clarify that paragraph. This goes back to a point that the Director made a little while ago, in that when we're in a situation where we have a deficit like this, before we can request corporate support with addressing that deficit, we have to investigate options for containing that deficit within our own service.
Yeah.
So the only option, and what this paragraph is saying, is that the only option for us to readjust our expenditure line to bring it into balance with our income line is actually to delete that number of posts from our establishment, because all of our costs in that business are largely staff costs. So effectively what I'm saying is that to my mind, would be unsustainable for the council going forward to have a staffing reduction of that level. However, we have to put it on the table for consideration before we can actually go forward and request some corporate support with this.
No, I appreciate that clarification.
Thank you. Cttee?
Thank you, Chair. And it was just really to come back really to the initial point made by Councillor Thompson and then followed up by Councillor Carruthers in terms of the budget setting process. And I would just like to remind Councillor Carruthers that in fact there was a budget set, and the Conservatives' budget set was including a reduction in the building services. So it was just really to make that point, although the point was made by Councillor Thompson right at the start of this debate in terms of the dates. There was further information of a report in January that wasn't given to any of the members of the council here in order prior to that budget setting process. But it was just to confirm that the Conservatives in their budget did in fact have a reduction in the building services. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that point at the start wasn't missed. Okay, so we'll get the recommendation. Sorry, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. 3.9, it talks about fees being increased possibly by the better performing authorities. What is the criterion for better performance?
There is an annual report that goes from this committee to Scottish Government, which myself and Andrew signed this year. But Steve, I don't know if you want to sort of enhance on that.
Yes, Chair. There is still discussion going on with Scottish Government to answer that exact question. What do you mean by better performance? Now, the response that we've had so far is that they will look at our planning performance framework and the indicators that are within that and look for continuous improvement in those indicators. And they tend to cover all of the speed of processing planning applications, for example, but they also cover some other elements of the service. Now, we'll be bringing the annual planning performance report to the July meeting of this committee, so we'll be able to see in a bit more detail exactly how we are likely to be measured going forward.
Jim?
So I take it, Steve, cost efficiency or cost recovery is only one measure of performance. The speed of turnaround of applications is a very significant measure.
Chair, yes, that's correct. It tends to be the indicator or the set of indicators that particularly that the Minister and the Scottish Government in general tend to focus more on.
And on Appendix 1 at the top, it indicates that by national standards, we are actually doing pretty well. in terms of cost recovery and also speed of turnaround?
Yes, Chair, I think that was one of the outcomes from the improvement service review that was commissioned, is that we are ahead of the national averages in terms of cost and also performance at present.
I think also cost per application is less than the rest of Scotland, and if the Tories want us to put that up, that's fine. Stephen.
Thanks again, Chair. Having listened to what members have said, on page 28, I think the key thing is obviously don't have unrealistic estimates, which is logical. The other thing, just in terms of staffing, obviously it does outline in the report that it's the performance that we've managed to achieve that actually enables us to negotiate with the Scottish Government and then raise fees accordingly, which is based on performance. So anything that put that under threat would be counterproductive. So it would seem to be strengthen the case, as Steve Rogers sort of said, that really it has to be laid on the table, but really you wouldn't want to diminish a team that's already arguably stretched. In fact, you'd want to ensure that that's protected to maintain the performance and hence keep the fees available higher. But I think, I'd be quite happy. It just seems very logically laid out, just page 28, the 4 recommendations there in the improvement service, and I'm not precious about us having to come up with the right answer. If it takes a third party to come up with the best answer and we take that on board, then by all means let's do that, because it seems clear and logical that way.
You want to answer that? Happy to take that on board? Yeah, I've got Malcolm and then Patsy.
Thank you, Chair. Just again, going to page 28, the biggest issue here to me at the moment seems to be an accounting issue, actually, as much as anything else, with the budgeting process that's been highlighted before. The budget is, in effect, a target, and as everyone knows, an important part of a target is it's got to be attainable, and this one doesn't seem to be attainable because it basically rarely, if ever, achieves that income stream. Steve says there's always variations, but the variations seem to be on the downward side and very rarely on the upward side. So I think the budget needs to change, which is exactly as specified on page 28. I think also that the staffing level is important to keep up the service. This is a statutory service that we're providing here. People need to access this service, and everything needs to be done in an efficient and prompt manner, which obviously helps to build the economy. So I would like to know how any of our technological developments that we've discussed before were progressing to hopefully improve efficiency, and I think some of that would probably come into a spend to save sort of context, which I would like to hear that there's things moving forward on that, which is going to help you to keep that going. Also, I think as it is a statutory service and it does have to be provided, 9.4 in the Roman numerals on page 28. I think perhaps we just have to face up to it, that corporate support is going to have to be part of the deal with us. But there is a worry in setting a budget for your department where you know you're not going to be able to achieve it. And I don't really think that's very good practice. But if we can go back to the part about the technology in particular, I would like to hear if there is progress being made.
Steve, on the technology for e-planning, e-standards.
Chair, yes, certainly I can give a brief update on that. We have had ongoing discussions with both BTS and our external supplier, IDOCS. That has resulted in a number of improvements being made to the operation of the uniform system. So there have been some improvements that we've experienced in terms of the speed of the system. We're also progressing the issue of mobile working and mobile devices for our building standards officers, and BTS are about to place an order on our behalf for the necessary kit to allow that to happen.
Okay, Patsy?
Yes, I'm just looking at page 27 and it's paragraph 4, and I just wonder, it mentions about the major applications of more than half, but also local applications have declined by around 36%, which must obviously affect our income. But I wonder if that is as a result of increased permitted development that does not require as many planning applications to come forward, perhaps. And that's maybe where there's something that needs to be realigned in future. I just wonder if that is the case.
Stephen?
There's probably an element of that, but I think probably the biggest contributing factor has been the decline in development generally. We've seen a drop-off in development activity, which is reflected in the application numbers coming forward, and also the fee levels. Although interestingly, just in the year that we've just finished, 17-18, planning application numbers for the first time in a couple of years were actually up. So we were up by 9% compared with the numbers that we had last year. Building warrant applications, on the other hand, were down 9%, and we tend to find that the two work cyclically, but they're never synchronized. One tends to follow the other.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the recommendations in. Members are asked to note 2.1, agree 2.2, with the amendment there at 3.11 rather than 3.13. 2.3 to note and 2.4 to agree. Ian?
Just on the 2.4, I wondered, it seems a bit tenuous, unless I picked that up wrong. Because we're talking about environment infrastructure, but the development of sustainable action plan for the plan and regulatory fees. Maybe it is appropriate, but nobody's really touched it in regards to the fees, kind of level of fees, what's going up in Appendix 2 and such like. Some are staying static, some are going up, seems like considerable amounts. It seems a wee bit tenuous, some of them. I don't know if that's the case or not, but just maybe some clarity in regards to that. I thought might have a wee bit of discussion on it.
I think some of the fees that you've are actually due to regulations that came down from the Scottish Government, things like that. Is that perhaps some... Steve?
Yeah, I think it is part of the action plan for us to make sure that we are generating income on all fronts, as well as the statutory fees. There are the non-statutory fees and charges, and those are the ones that are set out in that appendix. They have been looked at through the charging for services framework. And as members will be aware, there was a template that came forward, a savings option as part of the budget process, but that focused in on just a handful of key council charges, so each department was left then to continue its own review, and this is really the outcome of our review of those fees and charges.
Agreed 2.4.
I suppose, Chairman, there's a point in there.
Agreed 2.4, moving on then. Item number 7 is Economy, Environment, Infrastructure, Economic Development, Capital Projects Update Report.
Chairman, we've got a 90% increase in charge in 1 year.
Yeah, I'm finished with that one now. It was agreed, somebody shouted agreed before you actually came in the meeting. I gave you the opportunity to ask the question. The answer was given. I'm now moving on to item number 7. Item number 7. This report provides an update of the Economic Development Capital Programme 2017-20. The Head of Economic Development will take any questions on the report, and I will now move to to Jan to ask any questions, unless you've got anything to add. Director?
I have nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Members, Cttee, and then Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. So, in regards to this, I've actually got 3 specific questions about the Stranraer waterfront. So, my first one, under 3.2, it's mentioned there that there's going to be an information seminar, which certainly at Wigton Area Committee we have been asking for that, and it's very welcome to have. I'm just actually looking for confirmation, because this is part of our capital projects. Is this going to be an information seminar for all members rather than just the Wigton Area Committee members, which is where we've actually requested that from? My second question is in regards to the rail network discussions that are happening on page 33. Just to confirm, are we looking at the costs of the rail journeys? Because Stranraer is just outside the area, which is much cheaper to travel, and it's just a question, is that part of the remit that we're looking at? And the third question is looking to the future, because this is lots of really positive information of where we are and what the plan is now, but we do always need to keep an eye on the future. And certainly my understanding is in the procurement process we had one developer looking to take this project forward insofar as McKinney. And I'm just wondering, are we still in touch with that developer? Is that still, obviously I understand that we need to get the site to a point that it's actually able to be marketed, but we have gone through that procurement process. What's happened with that? Are we still going down that line? If not, what's the plan for the future? Because it's a really positive report, and I don't want to take away from that, because we have made progress and it's really positive, and I'm really pleased to have this, but it's just keeping that one eye for the future. Thank you.
Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the seminars, I had planned 2 seminars. One was more of a getting in touch with the Wigtown area committee, but the other one would be a full seminar for all elected members to attend, because this is a strategic project and it's important that all elected members understand the implications, also understand the options that are coming together. With respect to rail, the discussions we've had with Network Rail has really been about the place of the railhead, not so much on the cost, because that's out with the remit of the project. This would be something that maybe members would want to lobby with the powers that be when it comes to transport, but it's not within the remit of this project. And then finally, the question about having the eye to the future. The exclusivity arrangement that was with McKinney's expired a year ago. We still keep in contact with McKinney Group, but it will be up to members to decide the options that go forward, and it will be based off that decision as to whether we would deal with a range of developers, whether development is an issue. We've got an eye for the future, but that's going to be within the committee paper.
Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Cttee kind of beat me to the mark there, but I've got supplementary. We talked about the McKinney Group. Was it not agreed 3 years ago that they would be the preferred developer? And if they're not, then does that mean that once we bring the site up to standard, we're going to go back to procurement and maybe push this again about 2 or 3 years down the line?
John.
An exclusivity agreement is for a specific period of time, for a specific piece of work. This was very open, and it wasn't for a specific development. It was working together in partnership. The exclusivity agreement wasn't just with the council and McKinney Group, but it was also with Stena. It will be dependent on what the options, the preferred options that this council decides on, and the affordability of those preferred options. We have to have that opening, and we have to have that flexibility with it, because things have changed. We are no longer in the same economic circumstances we were in when the exclusivity agreement was made. Even we're not in the same financial situation which we were in when the opportunity to look at the waterfront occurred. We did not have a Brexit issue either when this happened. So we have to take into account all the current economic impacts, all the current issues that are occurring, and the opportunities that we have here. And so the options that you will get and what you will see in the seminar will be pertaining what the situation is now and for future years.
Andrew, you want to come up?
Just to come back on that, Chair. So is the McKinney Group still in the process as being a potential developer, or will this have to go back to procurement at the end of the day?
We are working on options, and I'm going to repeat this again. It will be up to elected members to make that decision based off the information that we will lay in front of you. We will be keeping McKinney Group up to date once we have the information in front of us to be able to give to members, and not beforehand, because we are still developing options. We have 5 clear options that we will be presenting to you. We are still doing work on those options, and it will be up to elected members to make those decisions based on the information and the evidence that we present to you.
Okay, do you want to come back on the same point?
Yeah, it's just on the same point. Thank you, Chair. It's just in regards to the timing. I understand that there needs to be options brought back to elected members, and that's the way it should be. But when are those options going to be brought back? And I guess, as a newly elected member, it's a year since I've been elected. I'm still trying to ascertain the timeline, and we've been assured that we'll get that information at the seminar, and that's fine. But I guess the question is, the people of Stranraer want to know, when are they going to see something happening? And I understand just a rough time of when you'd be looking for members to make that decision, at what committee, what year. It's just to give some indication of where we are and what the plan is for the future.
Every single option will have a risk assessment. It will also have an outline plan for each and every one of these options. This will be what elected members will have the seminar on, and then it will be presented for elected members to make a decision in July.
So we've got Jim Dempster, then Ian Carruthers and Jim Combe.
Thanks, Chair. Initially, I'm just looking for a bit of reassurance. I'm looking at page 35 and 36, and it talks about the Kirkconnell Public Realm Project, the Sanker Public Realm Project, the Upper Nithsdale Gateways, and the Upper Nithsdale Enterprise Centre. That was a total scheme that we committed £750,000 to 2 years ago. The figures here certainly don't add up to 750k. But that aside, one of the gateway projects, especially as it's currently been worked up, will hardly spend £8,000, never mind £80,000, because it's roughly £80,000 for each of the gateway projects. So what I'm looking for the reassurance is that that money is committed to these projects as part of the economic development opportunities. And if we don't spend it on the projects that are currently identified, we can go back again and find other ways to further enhance the gateways, especially to ensure that we create the right opportunities and the right climate for that. That's one question. The other thing is, I've actually had a blether with Jan about the project reprofiling in Upper Nithsdale and the Enterprise Centre. Yeah, it's at green, although there's an issue with that. And the last question is, what on earth is the corporate property investment in Lockerbie and Upper Nithsdale projects? Because I don't recall them, and it just says projects, it doesn't identify them. I presume that's different for the 750k because it incorporates Lockerbie as well. That's on page 36, the last 3214 section.
Okay, John.
So question 1, the £750,000, we will be presenting an update report. Well, it won't be an update report, it will be a state of the nation, all the projects within here over a period of time that elected members have approved. We will be presenting this report as well as reprofiling and showing you what we will be what we would like to do in the future. It will be up to elected members to make those decisions, but I can assure you the £750,000 that was allocated for the Upper Nithsdale projects that you see here all the funds have been allocated to those projects, and what we will be doing is we'll be doing a reconciliation for you so you can see that. The next question that you gave me was regarding the Upper Nithsdale Enterprise Centre, which we've still got at Amber. We still have the funds for that. We are speaking with stakeholders, but there are quite a few different options, and we have had this discussion, Councillor, but there are quite a few options on how we would move this forward. But what we need to ensure is whatever it is within the budget that we've got, and it is going to have the positive impact for the community, and the community are actually behind it.
printed that in Jan already. It's green, but obviously it's underneath it's amber, so that's a mistake on my part.
The final question is about corporate property investment. Funding was put towards a couple of projects, which was to enable employment sites. One of the sites is in Callahom, is that correct? And the other one is
the director's I think I need to interject here. Yeah. These projects were part of an exempt paper that you considered previously. So I don't want to say too much in the public domain about the support that was given, but it indicates that we are on programme on these, but that was exempt paper that you considered previously.
I'm content with that, Chair. That would have been fine at the outset, because I just hadn't sprung to mind what the projects were. But thanks for that, John.
Thank you very much, Jim. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just a small bit of clarity in regards to page 35, 3.2.7. It refers to Annan High Street. And there was a great meeting on the 14th of April. A lot of people turned up, and it refers to that. In the next bit, it says, whilst in spend, there has been a slight slippage. The activities of this project forms the basis of supporting Annan and the greater DG12 initiatives. I wonder if you could tell me what the DG12 initiatives, but I thought it was just an Annan High Street project. Because DG12 goes out to East Riggs, Brightcrook, right over Newby, that kind of area. It's quite a large area compared to the High Street. So.
John?
Essentially, this alludes to another exempt item which we discussed regarding I think it was the first agenda item today, so I would discuss it out with this meeting, but I can't discuss it at the moment.
I'll just take the detail via email, Chairman, and if anybody else needs to see that, but I think it's important.
If John can send you an email.
Ideal. It does talk about the High Street.
You may remember the motion that came to full council.
I do. I thought maybe that was alluded. I just wanted to clarify in regards to that. I thought some of that was in the public domain. Maybe not all of it, but I thought the kind of high level stuff was. But I think it's important that we realise what the tie-up is. Initially, that was a High Street project, and if it's going wider, we need to understand what that is.
So she'll send you an email. Okay, Jim?
Thanks, Chair. 3.2.8 and 3.2.9. There's a certain lack of detail under these headings. Could you provide some detail on them, please?
John?
3.2.8 was a shopfront scheme that the council had for some time. The funding is quite reduced now, and the scheme is complete. 3.2.9, I'll have to get back to you. I think that was before my tenure, and most of the work had been done, but I will send you an email about that, if that's fine.
Are you happy enough with that, John?
Another wee point, Chair, if I may. We've had mention of gateways. What happened to the Stranraer gateways?
Yeah.
Again, that's before my tenure. I will get one of my officers to send you an email regarding that.
Okay. And then we have Stephen and then Malcolm.
Thanks, Chair. One of the questions I had has kind of been touched upon, which was to do with the Lockerbie and Upper Nestdale projects for corporate property investment. Would it be possible, though, for that maybe to be circulated to the respective members of those wards by email, just because it does indicate that there was a bit of a slippage? So without, obviously compromising the meeting today, if that information could be shared appropriately. The second point was just to follow up on the question about fair fares, for want of a better phrase. So the ScotRail and the Network Rail issues that are going on in terms of Stranraer Station, but I think it's because of the boundary between SPT and our Swestrans, I presume. So is there a way that could be taken up perhaps as either a lobbying position or even an action point from this committee to Swestrans, or appropriately just to say, can we get equity of fares?
I think that's what John was saying. It was part of the lobbying side of things. We could look at that and see if I can take that forward.
Just conscious that we have the chair of Swestrans here, so I was just wondering if you could.
I'm sure we can ask West Strands, Chair, if he can lobby on our behalf to get the fair situation set out between Stranraer and SPT. We have Malcolm, Jeff, then Doug Doogie.
Thank you, Chair. The thing that stands out to me in here is that we seem to have an awful lot of projects with a lot of slippage. I'm a bit concerned that some of these things aren't getting progressed as quickly as they potentially should. And then to get back to my other old chestnut that I keep banging on about, the Dumfries High Street improvements, we're going again we're trying to come up with another prospectus, and we seem to do study after study, yet very little seems to happen. And as Councillor Hagman said about the people in Stranraer, we're actually at the case in Dumfries that people would actually just really like to see something happen. And I mean, the businesses and people in Dumfries Town Centre must be one of the most studied groups in the whole of the country. They must feel like they're in one of Miss Sir Attenborough's documentaries or something with the scrutiny they've been going under. But I think it's really time for action. And we end up with this thing too, just a bit of clarity on the actual figures. We'll just use the Dumfries one, the 3.2.5. We've got 279, we've got an actual of 107, a slippage of 172, that's fine, they add together. So we've got the 1.5 million is the total budget, I would imagine. How far along the 1.5 million are we? Are we towards the end of it or whatever?
Jan?
The 1.5 million was actually allocated for physical works on the Dumfries High Street. That's what it was, physical improvements. However, a decision was made to lever that money for the betterment of not just doing physical works, but to see if we could get leverage for other projects to be able to attract more funding and to help businesses, practically help businesses. And so I will be bringing a report back in the next phase to be able to give you a reconciliation of all the projects, of what you've agreed to spend and how much has been spent. At the moment, I can't give you this, because it would be assumption. What I can say is that for last year, only 107,000 of the budget was spent. So we'll give you a reconciliation. That's number one. Number two, we want to be able to track to make certain that if members have given us a budget like 1.5 million, that we keep an eye on that and we have that. So we'll be working with finance to do this. If we go slow on a project, that means we will not be spending as we should be spending. And what has happened with the Dumfries Town Centre, the high street improvements, we're not doing the physical improvements. So what we'll have to do is reprofile this and then come back with a better proposition, exactly as you're saying, to be able to put in action. But a lot of the projects that we have here are either pump priming, so they're developing feasibilities, that's what the Stranraer waterfront is, or else other projects we're actually delivering. And that would be like the corporate property investment or the regional property investment where we're doing the shop fronts. So I think we need to be a lot clearer with the way that we bring projects to you and the way that we report. And that's been part of the process of coming to members and sharing these projects that members have instructed that we undertake, and ensuring that you know where we are with each project. So that's what we've tried to do. So I hope in a roundabout manner I've been able to explain your question.
Welcome.
Well, it still gets back to the point, when people ask me, when is something going to happen? When is it going to happen?
Our aim is to work with the town centre and not to inflict things on the town centre, but to work collaboratively with the people in the town centre, organisations like the Stove, like the Rosefield Mills, so that we can get better use out of our money. And that's the aim that we're trying to do. And that's essentially what members have instructed us to undertake.
Jeff?
Mine was exactly the same question. This 1.5 million has been sitting in this account for a long time. People aren't seeing anything happening in terms of the mid-steeple. So, sorry, in terms of the high street. I know there's the mid-steeple project, etc., which is going on. But the problem is that members of the public aren't aware of this. So I think what we need to have is an interim report anyway, saying what we are looking at in order to spending this money and how we can actually lever in additional match funding. So if we could have that as soon as possible.
We'll have that done. Okay, Dougie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It is a big issue, this Dumfries Town Centre regeneration in the state it's in just now, and it's a sad state of affairs, really. But you've got to remember, the majority of the public don't actually see these meetings. You know, they're not aware of what's happening within here. They're aware of what's not happening outside. I happened to be in the street, up the street on Sunday, actually, and I met some tourists, and I got talking to them, and they actually commented on the mess of the high street. And when you actually look, I think when I was actually viewing what they were pointing out to me, every single paving stone had bird excrement on it. You know, the shop fronts were dirty, filthy. You know, can we just not get the basics right first? Then we can start doing all these feasibility studies and turn the town round. But we need to get the town cleaned up. We need to inspire people. We need to show them we're actually doing something as a council.
My understanding now is the town centre ambassadors actually looking at that process and trying to get some people in to clean the whole area up. I know for a fact that they've been talking to some of the ex-service.
My point now is we need to do it now.
Yeah.
No talking, just let's get on with it.
I think that we're moving away from what this was all about, which was about about a town centre improvement, and then we moved that to be able to lever more funds. Colleagues in communities, and we've got an excellent ambassador, work with the businesses, and I have other staff who work with the town centre ambassador. And that's the way that we've been trying to do it, in a partnership manner, in a collaborative manner. And that's what we've been instructed to do, but actually that's the best way of doing it. We had the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund head here from Scottish Government, who was impressed with the way that we're working collaborative with each other. So although you might not see big actions happening, what we're doing are the real things that matter, and that's building relationships with businesses and community groups, and that's what we need to do, and working across the council with colleagues. So that takes time, but I will commit to you that we will bring a paper to you. So there will be many papers coming from my service, but this is an important paper, and it's quite evident it's important to you, which will give you the way forward for the town centre and reprofile how we will use the 1.5 million that you've committed to ensure that we get that leverage for Dumfries Town Centre.
Dougie, I'll take an action to write to the Communities Director asking for an action plan and a timetable when some of this work's actually going to be happening, and when, can we push it along, that type of thing, okay? Andrew?
Thanks, Chair, for letting me back in. This is on Stranraer Waterfront, but on the marina side this time. Back in 2012, there was 2.4 million was coming forward for the second breakwater. It was, however, scuppered and spent in other areas. Can I ask, is the second breakwater still a shovel-ready project that we could take on into the South Scotland Economic Partnership or Borderlands?
John?
I will have to find out from my colleagues from engineering, because they are the experts who have worked on the first breakwater, and I'd need to find that out, so I could bring that back to you, Councillor Agousti.
Director?
I think it's a pertinent question that the Councillor has asked. We'll do a short briefing paper for members of the EI, just to bring you up to date on that. It obviously links and is complemental to any further development of the marina. So we'll put that together for you. I don't have that information in my brain at the moment. Thanks.
Sean?
It's really just a little reminder, but we're here, I think 6 months ago with regards to, and I think a way forward that we'd identified, and I know you're looking at that, is that we have a number of regeneration vehicles or, areas that we want to actually, like Dumfries Town Centre, Stranraer Waterfront, Annan, Lockerbie, areas like that. And I think part of the work going forward, Jan, was to to look at how we can bring the communities closer together rather than members turning up every 6 months or 3 months and asking, you know, what's the progress on this. It's clear that whilst Annan Regeneration Steering Group isn't probably the ideal model, it actually, you know, something like that should be set up, so that means it will involve the communities, it'll involve the community councils, local members, local partners, organisations, etc. And I think, you know, with the number of kind of economic regeneration projects that we have across the region, including up on this dale, Jimmy, I think there is a need to actually look at how we actually go forward, because a lot of work has been done, or you know, but it's just the miscommunication or people aren't aware of it. So we need to actually get the model of delivery nearer to the locale where the economic regeneration is happening. So I know that's a piece of work that you're looking at, but hopefully we will get like an identified special purpose vehicle that would suit all, that we can actually start delivering projects and be a lot closer to the projects and make a real difference in those regions of Dumfries and Galloway.
Jan, do you want to come back on that?
No, I would concur with the councillor on that, because what we're finding that with Annan, we've got a good process in there, and that is assisting a number of projects, not just the High Street project. And maybe from some of the work that we're doing, that will be a good stepping stone for Dumfries Town Centre and in the future for STRANRAER.
David?
Thank you, Chair. I think it was at the time when we were awarding a grant to some airy-fairy collective that I tried to say that we're elected and you're paid to come up with solutions. So I don't think we should run away from inflicting change, and people are ready for change. Anyway, that argument was lost at the time, so we're now in the vacuum of nothing happening. Within that time, couldn't we just try reintroducing traffic into the High Street? That, in my opinion, is the single largest death knell that's been thrust into its heart. And with shops closing all the time, it may or may not work, but let's just try it.
I'm just wondering if this is the appropriate place for that to come to. There are some road traffic orders in place for the High Street, which stops traffic coming in between 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock, if I remember properly. That's already in place. You have to go through some form of consultation. I think, David, if you want to put that forward as a suggestion, can you write to the director and see what the response is? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, can we go to the recommendation is just a note. Are we happy with the recommendations? Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, which is the Economic Enterprise and Commercial Development Plan. And on the 23rd of March 2018, Enterprise and Service Subcommittee fully scrutinised and agreed to recommend that Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee agreed the Enterprise and D&G refocused and refreshed Commercial Development Plan, Action Plan and Marketing Strategy. These documents are included for agreement, and the Head of Enterprise and Services will take any questions on the report. Unless, Director, you've got anything to add to?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair.
Ron, you've got anything to add? Members, Cttee?
Thank you, Chair. I'm considered quite a positive person, I think. I like to look at the positivities, and I think it's always great to be looking to the future, creating a plan. However, the plan that we've got in front of us today it's got very little details. Now, I would admit that I was in the subcommittee which looked at this and brought it forward, and I'd hope we'd come back with further details of actual figures, facts and figures. Now, looking at that, we have the development plan in Appendix 1, but we've got no other data. We do have background information, which I've done my due diligence and looked at, and certainly the first background paper was in reference to June 2016. Now, item 10, Appendix 3, was actually our development plan. So we're 2 years later and we've got a new development plan, but there's no mention of how that development plan was perceived, how well it did. The budget outturns for that plan, well, 17-18 we were to get an internal income of nearly £31 million. There was an external income of £18 million for this financial year. Are we on track on those figures? What's happened to those figures? Because certainly we're in a situation now where all that information just seems to have been put to one side and we don't have any current up-to-date information. I would look at the next, or if I just have a look, in September 2017 we had a subcommittee, and I had to submit my apologies to that one, so I wasn't present at the time, but there was mention there of overspends of 36,000 for waste collection. There was a 45k overspend in staff costs. We actually made a saving of 243 from our fleet management. But again, where are we now in the current situation? Because it's very important to look at our current position before we can make a development plan. Have our plans that we put in place, have they been successful? Have they not? Because it's, as I say, we're asked to approve a new plan. What happened to the old one just 2 years ago? It seems like we're in deja vu, we're repeating ourselves, when in fact let's celebrate the positives from that previous plan. I presume, and I'm hoping that there were some, but where are they? Can we have more information? Because this report, although there's lots and lots of words, it doesn't actually give us what our income is, what the budgets are, how many people we're employing. It doesn't actually give any details as such, and it would be really useful in order to scrutinise properly to actually have the up-to-date information.
Okay, Ronnie.
Thank you, Chair. And clearly the original enterprising DG commercial development plan set out a journey for ourselves of where we were looking to take the service. As we developed and as we had the opportunity to have our own subcommittee, it allowed the debate to grow around where that journey should take the organisation. When we brought the revised proposal of the commercial development plan to the subcommittee, that was steered around the strategy, the direction of travel, where we're going to go, taking on board the concerns and the points raised by members of the subcommittee around where the opportunities for business for our organisation came from. In relation to the targets for the monetary elements, none of those have changed from the original commercial plan. We are still aligned to that information that was presented within the original plan.
Sorry, Chair, on that, there is no information. The original plan only went up to 2018. There's no information, so we can't align them to figures that aren't there, because there was no figures for where we currently are, just to raise that point.
You're absolutely correct. They were to 1718 was the target, with the associated additional savings that have been given to ourselves from our council. Those were in there. What we are setting out with the commercial development plan is the strategy to allow the realignment of where this business comes from. The monetary side will be reported as part of the outturn in future meetings, but this is setting the journey of where the business aligns and comes from to allow us to take forward the growth for the organisation.
Can I just clarify, the enterprise and D&G's budget comes to E&I committee as part of the budget, the budget scrutiny process every 6 months, so it's actually in there as part of the E&I overall budget scrutiny process. Alan?
Yeah, Chair, through yourself, I think just to assist with the members there. Obviously the subcommittee, when we taking the paper forward, was about a refreshed document going forward, basically to look at the 2 years on and the lessons learned from that. And I think certainly if you look at the old document compared to the new one, we've set it out in more principles that allows us more accountability to go back to EDG as far as outcomes, principles and values are concerned. We've put strategies in there that we're developing that suggested that the subcommittee would take back. We've also, once we've completed business plans and team plans for next year, we'll be able to secure the KPIs that sit in the back of that as well. I think one of the key elements on this, as was discussed and scrutinised in detail at the subcommittee, was the fact around trying to remove ourselves from competing with SMEs, and actually the new strategy of the B2B, the business to business concept that we're looking at, is actually about supporting the small and medium-sized enterprises, as highlighted earlier on, about building the local economy, and tying into that by looking at how we can support subcontractors through securing larger contracts. I think this document sets that out as far as an external strategy is concerned, and I think that's what the focus was generally to be. And I think looking at the financial elements that we've got, they'll move forward through the subcommittee as highlighted by yourself, Chair.
Thank you. Richard and then Patsy.
Thanks, Chair. When Enterprise and DG was set up, we were very positive, and we were looking forward to the Enterprise and DG making a positive financial contribution to the council. I think probably the realism, though, is probably a bit more negatives. I don't know how we can have a commercial development plan really without any financial figures. There's only a few global figures about how much we spend on the service, but no realistic targets of what we can expect in the future from Enterprise and D&G, which was in the initial development plan. I think probably because the original figures we had were not realistic, but I think we have got to have financial targets, financial outcomes within our commercial development plan, and these have got to be realistic, so I think they should be included in it. There's no figures. We've got a draft action plan for the Enterprise and D&G, but there's no figures associated to the cost there either. Brand design, letterheads, documentation, etc. We've rebranded ourselves a number of times as a council service, combined services, which became DG first, and now we're at Enterprise and D&G. But to be enterprising and Enterprise and DG, we need entrepreneurs, and we need people experienced in business to make this a success. Can have assurance from the director that we do have the entrepreneurship within the council and the business experience to make it success of DG, enterprising DG.
Do you want to have the director or head of service? Head of service.
I think to respond to the chair, through you, Chair, the answer is yes. If you look at the successes that the organisation has, looking at the arrangements with your law burns, what we're doing with urban housings and all these elements, the ability to have an entrepreneurial approach, the council, the creative thinking that sits within the team, I think it's second to none across Scotland, and so my answer would be yes, fully support that we have that within the service.
Director, are you happy?
Yes, I've no issue with what the head of service said. Thank you.
Patsy.
Thank you, Chair. This justification for refocusing enterprising D&G commercial development plan reads to me as a pupil doing an essay on perhaps entrepreneurship or creating a new company would write. It's full of words, or worse, acronyms, commercial development plan, CDP, business to customer, B to C, business to business, B to B, with a 2 in the middle, not a TWO. Total management facility model, TMF, enterprising DG suddenly becomes EDG. We then go to the words. I'll just list you a few. Who we are, inverted commas, God. Remodel, building local economy, unique in its ability, clear links, EDG brand, entrepreneurial, innovative, maximising income, developing commercial opportunities, strategies of gross numbers, develop a market, and now we've also just had another one which I absolutely loathe called Journey. All this sounds great, but there's I would agree with Councillor Hagman here, there's absolutely no financial plan or business plan. There's no examples of the previous development plan. Where are the accounts for past income generated opportunities? It's a wordy wish list with no backbone, and the word commercial should play no part in this plan. We should be there to facilitate small businesses to be able to progress. And I know that's part of your plan, but we see no wherewithal for you to do that. All I've heard is that actually we've put 1 or 2 businesses out of business because we've started to do things like taxi servicing and MOT servicing, and that has impacted on local businesses. That is not what we are here to do. We are here to facilitate and to help. We're not here to compete. And I think this is not a good plan, and I could not agree to the recommendation of the Enterprising Services Subcommittee to support this.
Do you want to come back on that one? Specifically, there's a slide in there saying that we put people out of business.
Chair, I'll say a few words and I'll allow my colleague. We do facilitate. We, within Enterprise and DG, we do not perceive or, for use a term, market ourselves as competition to people out there. We are most certainly, and I agree with the member, we are a facilitator to local businesses to grow and build within that economy. The number of small contractors, small organisations that have access to different contracts through ourselves is immense. And I will just cite one. If you look at the likes of the contract we have with Lawburn, because of the nature of that contract, without us, none of the local contractors would be able to get onto that because it is a closed contract. We facilitate the use of small subcontractors for that activity, and it worked well. Things like the MOT, it is a duty that if a local authority has an MOT testing station, it must make it available to the general public. That is the law. It is not us going out and we are not marketing ourselves to compete. That is down to an individual's choice. If they wish to come to Dumfries and Galloway Council, they can do, but that is the position. If we have an MOT facility for our own vehicle servicing and testing, we must make that available.
Just a couple of points, Chair, through yourself. I'm not quite sure if there was a question in there or just a response required, but certainly as author of the document, I can only apologise for the lack of academic content in there if that's what the member feels is missing. I think the other key point is that's getting missed at considerations at the first point of the report, which is point 3, that the contribution is 1.596 million. I think even if it was a reflective return to that for the following 2 or 3 years, that's a figure that the Council would seem across favourably as a commercial return, Chair.
Thank you, Jim.
On that, Chair, just could I respond? Well, it's just a quick response. It was not the academic content in this, it was the lack of financial content in this, which has been brought up by both Councillor Brodie and Councillor Hagman. It is completely not there.
Okay, Alan.
My misinterpretation of that, Chair, but the first few lines of that response was all about the words and the acronyms that was within the report, which are commercially viable within the external market that we're trying to secure. And I think, as I say, I've responded back to that for the financial return, that even in the commercial development plan that was signed off, the commercial plan that was signed off previously in 2014 had only Appendix 3 on one page. It was a financial commitment to that, and it was a one-off commitment. We have now reflectively achieved that, as is highlighted in the 1.596 million, and as suggested, if based on the fact that that will increase this year due to the alignment of the budget savings that's been agreed this financial year, that will increase as a return to the Council. I think that should be a reasonable financial model based on the review that we're actually putting a comprehensive commercial development plan forward to the committee that has been fully scrutinised at sub.
Jim, Colm, Cttee, then Stephen, then Ian.
Thanks, Chair. What reassurance can you give us that total facilities management is what the customers want?
No.
Absolutely, thanks for that, Councillor. I think what we've done is, if you looked at that, we've actually taken some independent market research that's been linked into the marketing strategy at the back. I think what we can find is, when we're looking at securing contracts through Public Contract Scotland, what we can find is there's very little contracts that are aligned to just one element of function. I think, and what we've got is within enterprise services at the moment, we've got what's seen as a multifunctional service, whether it's building maintenance, cleaning, part testing, water colour contracts. All them services sit within that. When we look at the public service contracts website, when we apply for them tenders, the majority of the tenders are looking for multi-functions organisations or deliverers that can actually deliver that. Where that helps us, that hopefully hasn't been missed out of the plan, is a lot of them functions we don't deliver in-house ourselves, but are certainly our partners within SMEs do. So the view is that as we can become a host contractor in part, support the local economy, we can pitch in for contracts, of which then obviously our subcontractors, as currently we do with the building maintenance and repairs, they would come along and then get added value and additional work associated with that. So the market test is there to answer the question, Councillor, through yourself, Chair, is basically on the Public Scotland's website. When we actually pitch for contracts, we can see over the last 18, 24 months that they're looking for multifunctional deliverers and not just single entities. Chair.
Thank you, Jim. Cttee.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. I'm looking for some clarity, really, and also I'm trying to do my duty as elected member to scrutinise this as best as possible. The commercial development plan that we originally agreed to in May 2016 was a 28-page document. It mentions the vast number, or in the words of Mr Dempster there, the immense amount of subcontractors that we employ. And there's a figure there, it's 460 back in 2016. Is that figure changed? It's an example of why this original report was a good comprehensive report. It was 28 pages, it had lots of facts, it had lots of information, it also set out the strategic future pathway. The one we're looking at today, 2017-20, has none of that information. So therefore my question is this on top of the existing report? Is this a supplementary report attached to the original one? And if so, why is the original one not in our papers to scrutinise? Because if this is a supplementary to the original, we should have the supplementary one in front of us, and having it as a background paper for us to go and find ourselves is fine. I understand that we're looking to save paper and we don't want to print everything, but surely that's a crucial element of this. And in order to recommend this going forward, surely we have to have all the information to us at the time in order to take that forward.
Cheers. It's not a supplementary paper too, it's a refreshed document that's actually all if looked at side by side, it's reduced the amount of words that's in the original document. To touch on the example of the subcontractors, if within the KPIs we've actually set that against a target. Now them targets still have to be set and they would go through enterprise and subcommittee to be confirmed based on the fact that some of them will tie in with the business plans. But when you look at, without me picking it out at the moment, I know it's in there, is that we've got a KPI in there about postcode related subcontractors, whether they're Dumfries and Galloway, whether they're Scottish or whether they're English. So they're actually based on the KPIs. There's no reportable KPIs on the old commercial development plan other than one financial element.
Can I just come back then? So if we're not actually going to get the information, we can't possibly agree it. So surely today we should be noting this plan, and then actually when we have the figures, we can then agree that. But I mean, that would just be my suggestion, that perhaps we're noting this as a good ambition, and it is useful to be ambitious and we need to have that. But I just have concerns about how we can agree something when we've not got the facts and figures. But I'm not criticising the ambition of that, because as I say, we do need to look to the future. As I mentioned in the previous item with the STRANRAER, let's look to the future, but actually let's make sure we've got all the information.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, Chair, for me, from where we're at, Wes, is that as far as my understanding was for governance, is that we're coming forward to agree the papers that was done at Enterprise and Sub. As far as that scrutiny was concerned, that was complete. I think from where we're at, as far as what's required is what actually the documents that are taken into detail, it's only an external strategy that's actually changed. As far as that's concerned, as I say, there was no agreed KPI. We haven't changed any KPIs or any targets that was set in the original commercial development plan, so there's no change required. All it is a change of strategy around supporting business-to-business customers and supporting SMEs.
Yeah, thank you. We're agreeing the recommendation for Enterprise Subcommittee, but we're also noting this development plan will help. I'll come back to that eventually. Ian?
Thanks, Chair. I just find it very interesting we've got the administration acting as the opposition. I really do find that interesting. And quite
because scrutiny, Ian.
Yeah, it's for the opposition in particular, but it's great when you see the administration actually acting as opposition. I think you need to deal with that, Chairman, out with this committee setting. I suppose, from a political point of view, and a member of this committee, I absolutely welcome any potential of growing the economy through this. And the two main facts we've got to be a participator in this and become a state-controlled company and compete with the private sector, or we got to actually be a host contractor or a major contractor and actually use as what's been put forward. There's two sides to this, really, from my perspective. Let's take forward the host contractor I don't think there is enough detail. I wasn't at the enterprise subcommittee. I'm not on that. I think there's been a lot of facts and figures that need to be made absolutely clear. If we're agreeing this as a economy, environment, infrastructure committee, we're absolutely clear on that. We've not seen the figures, so I think we need more information. And like I say, I think you have to get your house in order as far as administration is concerned, Chairman.
The House is in order, I believe it. That's why we're scrutinising some of these reports that come here. So it shows that we've got to do the opposition's job because they can't do it as well.
We'll do it.
David.
Thanks once again. At the subcommittee, it was explained to us that essentially ES or EDG has a sort of two parts. One is the facilitator, helping to put together bids for larger contracts and pulling in local companies for that. And I think, if I remember correctly, Councillor Nicola and myself were happy to agree with that, even though there is a sort of inevitable risk of cronyism in such arrangements, provided they could be done cleanly. We thought that was a reasonable thing to do. And the second part, it seemed to be said it goes out and looks for extra business to utilise capacity that we have internally. And the argument being made was that we have certain overheads, we have standing infrastructure not used all the time, personnel, etc., and they should be occupied. Now, in judging whether we should go forward here, we probably should have an alternative put forward. And I guess the alternative is to reduce the amount of infrastructure and overheads that we have. Would it be possible for work to be done as to how it would look if we actually divested ourselves of a lot of the capacity that we have? Because we're in a position to skew it for us, and through creative accounting, make it look like it's doing more than it actually is. And when I look at this report, there's not really much convincing economic material in it that's been pointed out by colleagues on all sides that would suggest that we would be great at business and make a lot of money out of this. But so, with regard to how we go forward, could we look at the alternative, please? Thank you.
Alan. We have agreed at Enterprise and D&G sub to bring this here for agree for the commercial development plan. That's been assessed. It's been quality assessed, impact assessed, I would imagine. It's been assessed through the system of processing with the Enterprise and D subcommittee. So I don't think we can off part come with an alternative, because you've got to go through that process of making sure assessments are done and risk assessments to business and that type of thing. But
Chair, if I could try and be of some assistance, what we're progressing here is what the committee and council has asked us to progress, and that's the direction that we will follow, unless there is another decision made that we go in a different direction. Now, we are following the subcommittee's agreements and approvals, and we're following this committee's agreements and approvals from previous meetings. And that's where our resource and our business plan indicates where we are going. And we're going in that direction in accordance with the council's plan.
Sean and then Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for bringing me in. Yeah, I mean, as Chair of Enterprise and DG, I think, one of the first things when I took over as Chair was that there does seem to be a fundamental kind of lack of understanding amongst members about the role of Enterprise and DG. And I think when we looked at the commercial development plan, there was a need to refresh, and the subcommittee agreed that. I think one of the things that we need to which has came out today as well, because the KPIs and the financial information is, just if they were to finish. I think they've asked some questions. But I think one of the things that we have to actually look at is that it's part of the reporting information, the finances and the KPIs go to the parent committee. But there was a need to actually look at the commercial development plan and there is also a need to actually get members fully aware of the role of Enterprise and DG. And, part of that role is that it has to provide key frontline services. That's a major part of the role. And the other the other when it was set up was to actually chase and look at commercial opportunities. Now, the first commercial development plan looked at trying to chase contracts, etc. And I think, whilst there was limited success, I think that we had the opportunity to look at I think someone quoted the 450 SMEs, and there is still that on the books and it is growing. And I think this refresh allowed us to look at how we could work in partnership more with the SMEs locally to actually develop them as part of our contribution towards the council policy about the economy. But I do think that there is, and there's maybe something that needs to be done with regards to, we did try to hold a seminar and there was a number of members attended, but I think the full council would probably benefit from getting a full understanding of enterprise and DG and the task that we've charged them with. And at the end of the day, the plan that's before you is a strategy. It's a path that we want to actually proceed upon, but how you actually get the target, etc. We need to look at that again, because it's actually encompassed within the overall EEI financial information, etc. So there's a couple of things that we need to take back and actually look at.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. It strikes me that the role of the opposition should be provide a sort of viable alternative. And the role of the administration is to scrutinise the business it's set the direction for. So I think it would be remiss of us not to ask questions about the reports in front of us, because we want to ensure, at least provide a quality, like a clerk of works almost. And I think we should allow someone from DG1, which is like, we should be questioning the reports in front of us, because we've set the direction, we get the reports back in terms of the progress, and we want to hold it to the highest standard possible while we are in charge. So, I mean, anything else aside, anyway, the comment on the paper that we've got in front of us, I think it would have been welcomed by members of the committee if there was more detail in terms of how many staff, what's the allocation, what services require what budgets, because that helps us determine then, is it going to be able to deliver realistically, because we've looked at realistic targets earlier in this committee. So is that realistic? And also, one of the things that came out in the actual paper itself was the piece of work which is about continually modifying and identifying the competition, if you like. And I'm sure the officers here will be able to talk about that, because it strikes me that there aren't that many total facilities management providers in Dumfries and Galloway. I suspect we would be the one, of a scale like this. So who really are we competing with in our own region, if not the risk that we're effectively competing with other small and medium enterprises? Now, I appreciate we might at times act as the middleman to enable smaller lots, if you like, for other smaller providers to be able to join a framework we could bid in for. A lot of that will be taken care of the Procurement Scotland platform that we use. So I think there is a wee bit of clarity needed there, so that we know we're not suppressing or stifling small businesses when we're trying to help it. But at the same time, are we then competing appropriately for external income out with the region, for example? And I know there's probably a few examples in Ayrshire or whatever. So how do we... It wasn't evident in the report, and I think really what I'm saying is, yes, I can see the ambition, etc., but really the detail underpinning that didn't fill me with as much confidence as it could have done. So that would be my input into that. Thank you.
Do you want to come?
Sorry, Chair, just briefly, I think on that concept, I think the total facility management model is well recognised within the industry, and I think it's important that when we look at that, all we're doing, and the report clearly states that we're not doing anything different from what we're doing at the moment. All we're doing is setting a strategy and dressing it up differently as far as so that we can actually secure contracts. We're not bringing in any additional service provision that would be in any more or less of a competition or cost to what's actually out there. All we're trying to do is look at it and say, and if you don't mind, I can give a good example, Chair, is that certainly over the last year, an example would be that we were chasing small contracts. And when I say small contracts, we would even be chasing individual contracts locally. And we were scrutinised at Enterprise and Sub for that, and rightly so, I believe. So an example of that would be we're maybe doing some carpet upholstery cleaning through a cleaning model. Now that contract, if not satisfied by the customer, was probably taking an officer as long to deal with 3 customers as it would to deal with a £250,000 contract. Plus we were competing with small and medium-sized enterprise within our authority. So this strategy is about moving away from that. It's about moving away from that and looking at how we can actually utilise the current resource we've got, because we haven't got anything else based on the budget restraints that we've got, and the current skills that we've got, which are embedded within the management team, which are commercial or entrepreneurial, and utilising that skill set and really just dressing it up differently under a TFM model that actually lets big industry see us as what they would look for if they were out to market looking for a contract. I think also, Chair, it's important to just get a point across, just in reflection, when thinking through the comments through the chamber today, is that if scrutiny at Enterprise and Sub had been the fact that they had been looking for additional information regarding finance and KPIs on that, then that we would have had to went back to Enterprise and Sub with that, because we couldn't change that now and then present it to you without going to Sub. And there's certainly nothing going through the minutes there swiftly. There's nothing in the minutes about us doing that. So that leaves us, I think, in a bit of a sticky situation with regard to that. But hopefully that answers the councillor's question about TFM.
I may have a suggestion how to get that sort of moving forward, I think, and I think it's important that members get as much information as possible as to where KPIs and all that actually come in. So before I bring Richard and David back in, I'm going to try and do a sort of third recommendation here that might help that situation. 2.1 and 2.2, I would like the committee to agree with, but under 2.3, and I'm not saying the recommendations at the moment because I've still got Richard and David to come in. A further report comes back to Enterprise and Sub on targets and KPI after the next EE&I committee, which is the 13th of July. It's actually taking place when the local review body should be placed, but in the afternoon we have a special EE&I committee to come back and robustly look at the KPI and targets of the commercial development plan. I think that helps the situation, because I believe there is little or no reports to come to the next enterprising committee, but this could actually help that situation. Would that be a potential?
Absolutely, Chair, and I think just looking back in the 23rd of March paper, actually, just to tie into that and support that statement, is that in the last committee report, we basically said key reporter performance indicators have also been included and will provide measures and accountability for reporting back to Enterprise and Subcommittee. So that was agreed as part of the 23rd of March, which supports that additional recommendation.
Second part, I've got Richard first and then David.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's refreshing that the members of the administration are actually scrutinising the refresh of the commercial development plan. I hope that myself and the independent groups are a viable opposition, because if we could try and scrutinise. I think it's also refreshing that there's a bit of consensus that we need a more detailed plan which can come which can come forward in the future. So I think that we have to note the recommendations and seek a more detailed plan for the future, and take up your suggestions, Chairman, for a special meeting.
I'll come back to that, Richard. Okay, David.
Yes, thank you, first of all, for the clarification that the subcommittee is in fact the place to revisit the principles of EDG. I'm a bit worried about a point of probity here, that I think I was told, I'm morally certain I was told, that the council, when it bids and wins a contract, considers itself first as the primary provider and uses its infrastructure and people as much as it can. It then goes down the list to its preferred contractors, and then in the case where it hasn't filled up everything, then it goes to others to source capacity for a job. And I'm worried there's two things. It artificially keeps us in business, parts of the council that would otherwise fall away, but that this priority list is an unfair competition against local traders. And it's not ideal when we are the dominant or quasi-monopoly provider in certain cases. And I'm just uncomfortable with that, and I'd like to ask the gentlemen whether they are comfortable with it.
Can I just, I think you mentioned something before where it was carpet cleaning, where you would have done that in the past, but you're not going to do that any longer. So that type of thing that you're suggesting, David, is it's not going to happen. It's a larger bit. I mean, I'll let Alan answer that.
Chair, through you, I'm working with our colleagues in procurement. Procurement packages have been set up to ensure clarity and transparency around how all contractors are engaged with the council, whether that be on what is called dynamic procurement, where there is small individual packages that are tendered for individual jobs, or longer term fixed duration contracts. So that is all done through procurement to allow clarity and transparency in how these contractors are taken on board onto the council's books.
That's actually one point that's helpful, but it's not my main question. Would be, let's say it costs us and our team £1,000 an hour to do something, and we could employ local people to do it at £750 an hour. We would inevitably choose ourselves, as I understand it, given the priority hierarchy that you outlined to me last meeting.
If I could just come in, Chair, please, just to help members at this point. The council has a procurement strategy, and I suggest that you read that. And I suggest that it'll set out exactly the circumstances and how enterprising services are awarded work. It is quite clear. We can't just award ourselves work. There's a complete procurement procedure, and that's been to full council and been approved by members. So it's all open and transparent.
Patsy, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that, Enterprising Services Subcommittee should be scrutinised by this committee, and I think, to be perfectly honest, we've done that really well today, and that's our job, and I think that's great. With your recommendations going forward, I would absolutely think your 2.3 is essential, but I would also agree with Councillor Brodie over there that I think we should note, at 2.1, I think we should note would be better than agree, I'm afraid. And I would suggest that goes forward at this time, because we have not got the information to agree at this moment. And I would hope that perhaps we could just note.
If I can just come back on that, Patsy. Obviously, the recommendation 2 is agree the recommendation of the Enterprise Subcommittee to support the refocused Enterprise and DG Commercial Development Plan, including the commercial. And then 2.2 is note this development plan will help meet our council's outcomes, etc. And then 2.3, a further report comes back to Enterprise and E&I Committee, basically, because it's happening on the 13th of July anyway, with those further information that that the members have asked about, the KPIs, the opportunities, all of that type of thing. So it's agreeing the recommendation of Enterprise and Sub, but coming back to E&I Committee with a further sort of more improved understanding, if that's...
But to be fair, Chair, I think at the moment we should note them, and then hopefully on July the 13th we could agree them when we've got all the information there. I
think we need to agree, because we need to get this corporate plan moving forward a bit. At the end of the day, I think at the further E&I Committee, then anything needs to be added or subtracted can be suggested there and then. But I think we need to move forward with this corporate plan and suggest what Enterprise and Subcommittees actually said here. We go forward with it in broader sense, but then come back with the questions that have been asked today by all members have been about, we understand we need to go forward this way, but we need to understand exactly what that means. And I think that's what I'm suggesting, is we agree we go forward this way, but come back with a more improved sort of report on the KPIs and staffing structures and things like that.
I would ask to look at the governance of that with regards to if that can go straight to the parent committee, and if so, I'm happy with that. But I think as well what members have to be reminded of, this isn't the first. There was a similar plan that went through that was approved by this. I wasn't on the committee at the time, but this is a refresh of the original one. So I'm just making the point that the reason why it's maybe presented in this way is because it's been accepted in the past. So this is just a refresh of the commercial development plan. So I wasn't on the committee last time. I don't know what the process was, but I would assume it was a similar process.
Yeah, I believe that was the process. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Surely what we are doing here is agreeing the refocused emphasis on business to business rather than business to customer, and also the emphasis on total facilities management. That these are the two major changes in emphasis which have taken place.
And I think that's why I'm suggesting coming back with that further emphasis, what it actually means at a further E&I committee on the 13th of July, which has been, you know, the officer said they can actually do that. So, no further members, I'm going to go straight to the recommendations then and suggest that 2.1 we agree, 2.2 we note, and 2.3 we get that further report back to Enterprise and Economy and Infrastructure Committee on the 13th of July about the fuller report on the staff structures and KPIs. Patsy?
Well, I would like to put an amendment forward to that, which is just exactly the same, but I would just ask that we note at 2.1.
Well, I'll put forward a... Okay. One more, yeah.
Yep. So could I just check with the governance officer, just in terms of recommendation, the recommendation you're putting forward, that yes, that is in fact sits within what we're competently able to do at this committee, given that it's come from Enterprise and Sub for us to then note, agree or whatever, and then we ask for information on the basis that you've outlined that that's good.
Yeah. Nick.
I think essentially, Chair, what you're asking for is further information to to build upon what Enterprising Services Sub has already agreed. You're seeking, as you say, some KPI and financial information that you don't feel you've got here. I think it's perfectly in order for the committee to consider that at a future meeting. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have a motion and an amendment. If you want to go through that process, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the motion is moved by yourself and seconded by Councillor Marshall, as set out within the report, with an additional recommendation at 2.3 regarding a further report being made to a special meeting.
It's not a special meeting, it's a meeting of EE&I.
Okay. To a meeting of EE&I on the KPIs to be held on the 13th of July. With the amendment from Councillor Gilroy, seconded by Councillor Brodie, that at 2.1, rather than agree the recommendation of Enterprising Services Sub, that we simply note the recommendation, and then the others are as per the motion. Yeah. So if we move to the vote, Councillor Dryborough?
Motion.
Councillor Wood? Councillor Brodie?
Amendment.
Councillor Carruthers?
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy? Councillor Giusti?
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman?
Motion.
Councillor Ingalls?
Amendment.
Councillor James?
Amendment.
Councillor Johnston?
Amendment.
Councillor Lever?
Motion.
Councillor Marshall?
Motion.
Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor Thompson?
Motion.
And Councillor Young?
Motion.
Voting is as follows. We have 10 members voting in favour of the motion and 8 members
voting in favour of the amendment, therefore the motion is carried.
Thank you much, ladies and gentlemen. Just for your advice, I've been advised there is no lunch today being ordered. So we'll just carry on and get the final two things out of the way, if that's okay with yourself, final three things. The next item is the Economic Inclusion Programme. This report provides members with an update on delivery of our Economic Inclusion Programme 2015 to 2020 and seeks members' agreement to submit a change request to Scottish Government European Social Funding Managing Authority to refocus the programme in line with Council Plan priorities and to reflect the changing national context for delivery until 2020 and to secure additional funding through European Structural and Investment Funds, ESIF, by extending the amended delivery to 2022. The Employability and Skills Manager will take any questions on the report unless you've got anything to add, Director.
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Lynn, have you got any? Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, there's quite a lot of positives in this report, and I think I've met with some of the officers that helped put this together in the past, but it's really just, again,
there's members being asking questions here, and there's interruptions going on across on the left-hand side here, so can we listen to the members speaking and getting some questions, because what I've found in the past is people are not listening when there are some good advice going out there, okay?
Thanks, Chair. Welcome that. Again, there's a few items in here where it's just, the only sort of real figure is the 490,000 mentioned in paragraph 3.1, which is a policy development funding. But there's a number of things included in the refresh, etc., which clearly will have resource implications or a budget line associated with them, whether it be staff or support or working in partnership. It's just not as clear as it could be. So I'm just wondering if there's either some chance to get updated on this offline, or if members of the committee could tease out some of the sort of questions. I'm sort of looking at 3.16, where we're talking about providing subsidies of 50% to wage to the employers for up to 26 weeks. Now, that's admirable, but equally there's going to be a cost associated with that depending on how many appropriate applicants there are, for example. So how does that impact on what we're trying to do, and can we afford it, and do we have to set limits on it? And similarly with some of the other proposals, it's just not clear from the report in itself, although I'm sure the answers are there somewhere, so it was just really on that same point. Thank you.
Okay, Lynn.
Yeah, the programme's entirely costed, and I would be happy to send out an email to everybody with all those details in it. To answer specifically on the wage incentive, that is something that was in the programme previously, and we've reduced the target to focus more on those with multiple barriers and to focus on young people as well. So the target has gone from what was 370 to 150 wage incentives, in line with the reducing budget that we have, and to keep it within cost, but focusing more on those most in need.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm reading through, and again, yeah, there's so much information in here. There's no mention of Brexit in here, and it's just to confirm that this money has actually been guaranteed. I'm assuming that there's not going to be any future funding from this, and this is the last time we're going to be in this position with a programme set out. But it's just actually, it would be really useful to get some further details on item 3.9 in terms of the business growth in key economic sectors, because it mentions that there's key sector support to our tourism, food and drink sectors, and certainly here in Dumfries and Galloway, that's a huge topic and vitally important. So it's just, if we could get some further information of how that support is being given, would be really useful.
Galen?
Yeah, absolutely. Take the Brexit question first. We've been guaranteed by both Scottish and UK governments that the funding will be in place until the end of 2023. So as it is, the funding will carry on without any change until 2023. We're committed to the programme just now up until 2020, which is why the third point references the opportunity to leverage the grant funding back in again at the end of our economic inclusion programme. The second point in 3.9, we're happy to provide more information. I'll get that.
Thank you. Patsy?
Thank you. It's on the 3.2, the youth guarantee, which I applaud and I'm very pleased to see it here. But what I really would like to know is, how do we know that what we're putting in place has worked? And do we do a follow-up and see where young people that we've helped into work or training or whatever, 5 more years down the track, it's actually done the job it was meant to do, and so that we learn from it? Because it's all very well just doing it, but we need to follow it through. And I don't know where we do that or how we do that, but I think we ought to.
Yes, we are doing that. You'll see in the paragraph there's reference to 2 different types of measure there. So the first measure is the school leaver destination return, and that's an outgoing measure which the Scottish Government have been using, which is a snapshot. The second measure that they're talking about is the participation measure. So they've replaced the school leaver destination, which just took the snapshot when they left school, with the participation measure, which encompasses young people from age 16 to age 25 and gives a percentage of young people who are participating. So that work is being undertaken nationally, and locally we contribute via our Youth Guarantee partnership. So it's not something that we can do by ourselves, but we do in partnership with SDS, DWP, colleges and all other organisations.
Okay, thank you. There's no other members. Can we go to the recommendations? We note 2.1, approve 2.2, and we've considered, and we should go for the extra 2 years for that particular development funding. Agree with that? Thank you very much. Okay, members, item number 10 is the Local Development Plan, Draft Supplementary Guidance, STRANRAER Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan. This report seeks approval for the consultative draft Supplementary Guidance to the Local Development Plan to be published for public consultation for 6 weeks. The Head of Planning and Regulator Service will take any questions on the report, unless, Director, you've got anything to add to it.
Nothing to add, Chair, thank you.
Steve, you got anything to add? Andrew?
Chair, I should actually declare an interest in this, as my mother owns 2 properties within the area, my grandparents own 2 properties, and I own a property within the STRANRAER Conservation Area. However, this is a consultative document that's going to go forward, so I imagine that I'm allowed to remain present in the room and maybe speak to this if possible.
I'll ask governance.
Certainly you can remain in the room whilst the discussion's ongoing, yes.
Am I allowed to speak to this though, considering that it will go to the public domain for consultation in the future?
Well, ultimately you'll be part of that public consultation in any event. So yeah, my advice would be yes.
And it's always down to the individual member whether they want to declare an interest or not at the end of the day. So Andrew, if you want to say something.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to iron out that before I went ahead. We were talking about the future earlier on. I find a conservation area as a young person quite scary. Having property in a conservation area is quite scary. Looking at how much it costs to actually maintain a home in a conservation area. And I think when we're talking in communities about fuel poverty and keeping people in homes that are fit for the future, how does a conservation area fit in with that, considering that it's mainly young people, elderly people, both with low incomes that live in the centre of a town, who are in rented accommodation? How can we say that this is building homes fit for our future?
Steve, you want to come on that?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important to remember that a conservation area is a positive measure. It's not about trying to prevent development. It's actually it's about trying to reinforce and build on the character of an area. Where that area has a recognised historic character, that can, in economic terms, be a strong asset. And I think there's plenty of examples of that all across the country, where local authorities in particular have built on the built heritage of a location, of an area, and developed that as an economic advantage, an economic benefit to the locality, bearing in mind that through our kind of regeneration strategy, we are effectively trying to support the future economic growth and economic development of Stranraer. This is one strand of that, to maintain its historic environment and its historic character.
Cttee?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just really looking for some more clarification on this. I understand that in 2012, permitted development within a conservation area changed. So previously, local authority, or if you stayed in a conservation area, you were automatically allowed permitted development. However, in 2012, that legislation changed, so therefore it wasn't inherently given. The council then had to place that on. I'm just looking for confirmation. Within STRANRAER, are we looking to give permitted development, or are we looking to change what is in legislation?
Steve?
Yeah.
Chair, yeah, I mean, certainly the purpose of the supplementary guidance is to provide guidance that will assist in the determination of planning applications. It's not about trying to change the statutory requirement for planning applications to be made in the first place. That's the place of Scottish Government legislation, which, as you say, was changed in 2012 when they reviewed permitted development rights, and the Scottish Government decided that all forms of development within conservation areas should require planning permission, which gives local authorities much more control over the fine detail within conservation areas, which goes back to the point I was making originally about maintaining and improving the kind of built fabric, the heritage of the environment, which is what makes it attractive.
It's just clarification, because my understanding was that yes, that is legislation. However, there was an opportunity that a local authority could put in a caveat to that legislation, whereas previously it was allowed, but the local authority could put a caveat to say that planning permission was required, and in effect 2012 that was flipped the other way, so therefore it wasn't given, but we could put a caveat in if we wished, and it's just whether we're looking to put that caveat in or not.
I think what you're referring to is that the previous situation, the council could take out what was called an Article 4 direction, which required, as you say, required people to apply for planning permission for minor works, and they were generally used within conservation areas. But obviously now that they have introduced this wider legislative change, there is no longer any requirement for Article 4 directions. There's no intention in this document to remove planning controls. That's not the purpose of this document.
Stephen, and any...
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of comments, really. One was to do with PVC windows and doors, and the other one was to do with the likes of telecoms cabinets. Obviously, in 21st century, a lot of it comes up at planning committee and at local review bodies, for example, whereby there's a desire to get energy efficient, and a lot of people in certain places, maybe already through an amnesty or a period where it was okay to fit certain types of windows, have done so, which might change the character of an area. But the people who are maybe wanting to do that, make that change now, are often faced with what seems like an inconsistent approach at times in terms of being able to permit it to make changes that might actually add to the energy efficiency of their house. Is that something that this consultation will actually, or this plan will actually bring back in terms of the views of the people? Because it does seem to be something that crops up unnecessarily. So I would suggest when the common sense approach might be more sensible. Secondly, the telecommunications, obviously we live in a digital world, or we would like to, but sometimes that's something that we should maybe make allowances for to preserve the character, but also acknowledge that we're in the 21st century. So I'm just sort of thinking, are there relaxations that we can be explicit about, or is that something that will come back as part of the consultation?
I think, Chair, we have to bear in mind what the purpose of this document is, which is a character appraisal of the conservation area in Stranraer, combined with a management plan for the future management of the conservation area, taking into account the initiative that is currently underway with the conservation area regeneration scheme, including small grants to property owners. So that's really the purpose of this document. I think some of the issues that you're raising relate much more to the overarching policies towards the built environment and conservation which are contained within the local development plan, and also some of the related supplementary guidance which is more general about how those policies are applied.
Thank you, Ian.
Just a quick procedural question. It's covered under paragraph 3.5, but we do actually get a chance to change this, unlike the LDP, don't we? If it comes back after the consultation, if members have even got different thoughts, like so what Stephen's picking up on there, we can actually amend this document as required.
Steve?
Chair, yes, that's correct. The document will come back once we've been through the public consultation, and then at that point members can consider the content of the document and make any adjustments or changes that they require.
Don't worry, Richard, I don't forget about you. It's just, I've got to go through a process. Right, that's you now.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's an excellent report, and if we follow the aspirations here, I think STRANRAER will be, I think the appearance of STRANRAER will improve. What was really impressed with the mention of the chimneys, how they're very important to the town landscape, and when I'm next in STRANRAER, I'll come and scrutinise the Cttee property chimneys to make sure they're all well pointed and good position.
Thank you for that, Richard. No other members. Can we agree the recommendations 2.1, 2.2? Thank you. Finally, then, members, we are now on to item number 11, Animal Feeds Enforcement Update. This report updates members on the proposed changes to the delivery of official controls of animal feed and to advise how this may impact the Council. The Trading Standing Manager will take any questions on the report. Director, have you got anything to add to this?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Sandra, have you got anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay.
While I was just having a read through this, the thing that struck me is that you can tell me if my interpretation is wrong, but we've basically been receiving £38,000 in the block grant to cover animal feed inspections, and we've basically not really been doing it. If you look at paragraph 3.7, it says there's only been a very small number of feed inspections, so have we not been fulfilling our requirements as far as that's concerned?
Sandra?
We have been doing, as you say, a small number of enforcement inspections. In addition to that, we have been providing a reactive statutory function. We've been dealing with any complaints that we receive and investigations and taking samples. But the level that we have been doing this has been a fairly minimal level, as it's not been high priority for us in previous years.
Chair, I wonder if it's worth adding that because that forms part of the block grant, it's therefore not ring-fenced or specifically allocated, and it's up to local authorities to set their own priorities locally, and that's really why this whole approach is being reviewed by FSS, because they weren't very happy with that arrangement, so that's why they want to claw the money back and put in place a different means of delivering feeds inspections.
That's why I can understand why they would be upset if they think that they're giving you money for doing something and it's not happening. But clearly, if you want to take this forward and you want to tender, where are you going to resource the staff from, and are there sufficient skilled staff available locally to take it on? In other words, do you have the capacity to do it without substantially increasing your costs, thus making it not viable?
Shanna?
The whole costs of providing the additional service would need to be provided through the procurement process in a service level agreement. We don't have the resources available to provide the level of service that they would like, and it's a much enhanced level to what they've been getting, which is why they've wanted to take control back so that they have a higher level of control, but they are also willing to fund it directly, which is the whole reason for going about this process. So we do have the skills and the training and the expertise within our service, because our officers who are there are trained to do this, but if we were to take on the additional work, then we would be requiring to appoint additional staff with the additional funding that we would receive, and we would train up those staff so they were providing an adequate level of service.
Can I just clarify a point on the discussions that we had a few weeks ago about regulatory requirements of the Food Standards Scotland and local authorities under regulation? I believe that there may be a couple of private companies interested in this particular contract, but at the moment the legislation hasn't changed for them to do the regulatory function. Is that still the case, or?
It is currently still a statutory function of local authorities. However, through the consultation process that FSS carried out last November, that was to have new legislation enacted which would pull the statutory functions from local authorities and make FSS the competent authority to carry out this function. The legislation has been drafted but not yet laid before Parliament.
Okay, thank you. Ian?
What's taken into consideration what you just said and two potentially private competitors, if that's the case? What's the likelihoods? Because it's not clear whether we've got a bid or not. It's leaving it quite open and at the discretion of Steve, I think, in real terms. What's the likelihood that we would actually bid?
I'm just thinking that because the legislation hasn't been agreed yet, there might be an issue there with the procurement side of things. And it's maybe an idea that I write to Food Standards Scotland and maybe even E&E at COSLA to say what sort of process are we going through here, because the statutory function still sits with the local authority, but where are we with all this? Because we can make a decision, I hope we are going to make a decision that we're actually going to apply for this, but there seems to be a misclarity on the statutory obligations of the local authority and others. So.
Chair, yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that there are still a few unanswered questions about the process that we will be taking up with Food Standards Scotland. As to the judgment as to whether or not we put a bid in, then obviously we would only do that if we considered it to be a viable bid. We don't want to end up in a position where it ends up costing us money to deliver that contract on behalf of Food Standards Scotland. We need to make sure that we get full cost recovery through that arrangement, and we can't make a judgment on that until we see the detailed specification of what service exactly they are looking for through the contract process.
Ian?
That's all the thoughts that are going through my head, because we just spoke about enterprise and DG, procurement, so on and so forth. We're going to go through a procurement review as it stands through the Audit Risk Scrutiny Committee. So looking at all these different things, and it's at odds arts in regards to, it's too early, really, that's what it looks like. So you just wonder, is this report maybe a year too early? It's got to get through Parliament, so on and so forth, before it could be implemented. If we're the actual authority, can they take the money off us if we are the statutory authority before that's changed? There's that many kind of things at odds with it here. It seems just a bit ridiculous, doesn't it?
Again, it comes back to the recommendation in 2.3 about the delegation going to the head of plan and regular service as requested in paragraph 3.10. I think that would be useful if the discussion between the chair and the vice chair actually happened on top of that as well, pointing to where we are. So if there's no other members, go to the recommendation. 2.1 is note the change of approach by Food Standards Scotland detailed in paragraph 3.4, which moves away from a delivery model through local authority groupings to a competitive tendering process open to private sector and other public bodies. 2.2, note the forthcoming budget reduction of 38,000, agree that this should be considered as a budget pressure, as detailed in paragraph 3.5.
Chair, just on 2.2, so, but are we definitely getting a forthcoming budget reduction of 38,000 if we don't yet know the lie of the land in terms of how this is going to pan out?
Steve?
That's certainly the indication that we've had both from Food Standards Scotland and from finance, from our own finance department, who have been notified that this clawback mechanism is going to be put in place. As you say, it's subject to confirmation of the new legislation. Just to go back to the point that I think Councillor Carruthers was raising about timing, our information from Food Standards Scotland is that this is all happening very quickly, which is why we're asking for this to be delegated to myself to decide whether we go ahead and make a bid, because I think the timing around this is that FSS are looking to put this out to tender over the summer, So we'll have to, and we're only being given a 4-week turnaround period to respond to that. So it is moving ahead really quite quickly with a view to the new arrangements being in place and ready to be delivered from 1st of April onwards next year. So that's when the £38,000 clawback would probably come into effect from 1st of April next year.
Do we need to just say then, note that subject to confirmation, that there'll be a reduction of 38,000, just to be... Yeah.
It's just to make it, okay. So note that subject to confirmation that forthcoming budget reduction of 38,000 and agree that this should be considered as budget pressure as detailed in paragraph 3.5 to 3.8. And 2.3, agree to delegate the decision of submitting a tender to Food Standards Scotland to the head of plan regular service as requested in paragraph 3.10 plus an input from Vice Chair and Chair of the E&I Committee. And I would also take an action to write to Food Standards Scotland and E&E at COSLA to see where we are with this whole issue. Members happy with that? Thank you very much. No further business. Have a good afternoon. I hope you can get to the fish and chip shop in time because there was no food there. I'll speak to you all soon. What was this?